My parents sent me to work at McDonald's while they paid for my sister's college, but I found these documents, and my mom is pale. Something happened with me and my family recently, and I need a place to tell it, to get it off my chest. My family situation has always been complicated, but things could and did get worse with what I'm bringing to you all. I'm looking for people who can read my story and then give me some advice or something. Growing up, I wouldn't say my family was rich, but we were definitely comfortable. My parents had steady jobs, owned a house, and seemed to manage their expenses just fine. Which is better than most families. From the outside, everything looked okay. But inside, it was a different story. I have a younger sister who is what you'd call the golden child. She was the one who got praised for everything, the one my parents bent over backward for, and the one who could seemingly do no wrong. My parents' relationship with me was different. It wasn't full-on neglect, but even a kid could see the favoritism. By the time I got to high school, I knew I had to think and plan for what I was going to do with my life. I wasn't expecting my parents to pay for all of college, but I was hopeful they'd at least want to help out a little. I had a plan. I would apply for scholarships to cover the majority of the costs and work part-time to contribute. Any help my parents could give me, I'd treat as a loan and pay back once I graduated and got a job. Seemed like a fair deal to me. However, when I talked to them about this, they shot the idea down immediately. They said they wouldn't contribute a single dime to my education. My dad straight up told me if I wanted something, I'd have to work for it. He suggested I start working at McDonald's right away to save up. At first, I thought maybe they didn't understand my plan and that it would only be a loan, so I brought it up again a few weeks later. I even showed them the scholarships I was planning to apply for, explained how the remaining costs could be manageable with just a little help from them. But they had understood perfectly fine. My mom said something about me reaching for the stars and advised me to be more realistic. My dad said college wasn't for everyone and suggested trade school or getting a full-time job after graduation. It wasn't a matter of them not having the money because we were in a tough spot, they just didn't see a reason to invest in me. Meanwhile, my sister, only a year younger than me, was getting a completely different treatment. My parents paid for her dance classes, bought her a car when she turned 16, and even gave her an allowance, just for keeping her grades up. I got none of that and I had to do odd jobs with the neighbors for spending money. So, I took my dad's advice and got a part-time job at McDonald's. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. I worked evenings and weekends while going to school, trying to save up as much as I could. It wasn't enough to cover college, but I kept telling myself it was an honest job. Besides, it was teaching me about hard work. Things with my family only got worse after I graduated. My parents told me I could stay at home, but only if I paid rent. It wasn't a huge amount, but it felt like a slap in the face, considering everything they were still doing for my sister. By that point, she was about to graduate high school, and it was clear my parents had been planning her college future since forever. They openly talked about her applications, took her on college visits, and even threw a huge party when she got accepted into a private university. But here's the kicker. While I was busting my butt working and saving for a dream they never supported, they'd been quietly saving to completely fund my sister's college education. They covered her tuition, books, housing, everything. One instance that sticks with me was when my car broke down. I needed it for work, but the repair bill was more than I could afford. I asked my parents for help, hoping they'd at least loan me some money or let me skip rent that month, but they told me they couldn't give me anything because they'd just sent my sister extra money for living expenses. I had to resort to a payday loan, which sent me into a debt spiral for months. The resentment was eating me up inside, but I kept pushing through, focusing on saving. After a couple of years, I finally had enough saved up to move out. I started looking for a place and found a small apartment I could afford on my own. When I told my parents I was leaving, they didn't seem too bothered. My mom just reminded me to take all my stuff before I went. And that's when everything changed. While I was packing, I found a box tucked away in the back of a closet in an unused room. It was full of old documents, but curiosity got the better of me, and I started going through them. As I sifted through the papers, I found a statement for a college savings account with my name on it. The balance on the statement was almost $60,000. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake. My parents had always made it clear there was no money for my education, but there it was, this account with my name on it, and it wasn't empty. But then I saw the withdrawal history. The account had been completely drained around the same time my sister started college. I felt sick. It didn't take a genius to figure out what had happened. My parents had saved that money for me at some point, but when the time came, they decided my sister's education was more important. I confronted my mom about it immediately. Her face went white when she saw the statement in my hands. She tried to make up excuses, saying they had to use it for household expenses, but the timeline didn't add up. It was clear they'd used the money to pay for my sister's tuition. I didn't stick around to hear the rest of her excuses. I finished packing my things and left that night. Since then, I've talked to a few friends about what to do. Some think I should take legal action, since the account was technically in my name, but I'm not sure it's worth the hassle. Part of me just wants to move on and put it all behind me. But another part feels like I deserve justice for the way they treated me. Even now, I can't believe they were willing to sacrifice me to give my sister a leg up. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them for this. Do you guys have any advice or suggestions on what I should do next? Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe. New stories every day. Update 1. It's been a couple of days since I posted, and I've had time to cool down and think things through. First off, thanks to everyone who took the time to comment and offer advice. The overwhelming majority of comments were about consulting a lawyer, that it wouldn't hurt to at least get a professional opinion. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I at least needed to know where I stood legally. If they really did drain that account without my permission, I was entitled to know if there was anything I could do about it. I genuinely didn't know. It only took a couple of hours of research, finding lawyers in my area, and I finally found one specializing in family law. I called their office, explained the basics of my situation, and they offered me a free consultation. Free is the best word you can hear at a time like mine. So, I went to their office on appointment day with the bank statement in my bag, which was my only evidence. I really liked the lawyer because she was patient and very professional as I told her everything. I told her about my parents' unequal treatment, my part-time McDonald's job, the fact they refused to help with college even though I offered to pay them back, and how I discovered the account after all these years. Basically, what I wrote in my first post. I should have printed it and taken it for her to read. She looked over the statement and told me it was possible I had a case, especially if the account was legally in my name and my parents withdrew the money without my consent. Though what I liked most is that she didn't sell this as a sure win. She explained that proving unauthorized use of the funds could be tricky, especially if my parents tried to somehow argue they used the money for household expenses or for my benefit. Even if I won the case, there was no guarantee I'd recover the money since my parents might not have it anymore. And then there was the cost. Legal battles aren't cheap, and I had to consider if it was worth the time, money, and emotional energy it would take. I left the meeting with mixed feelings. On one hand, I was glad I took that step and got some information about my options. On the other, the thought of dragging this out for months, or even years, is a bit daunting. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to pursue legal action, but I have time to think it over. In the meantime, I've been focusing on getting settled and organizing my life. Just moving on my own is a whole challenge. Finances are tight, but I'm getting by. To make things a little easier, I picked up another part-time job recently. It's not my dream job, but it's flexible, and the pay is decent enough to cover the essentials. Between that and my shifts at McDonald's, my schedule's been packed, which, in a way, has helped. Staying busy makes it easier not to dwell on everything that's happened, and every penny I earn gets me closer to a stable life. I've also been thinking about college. Even though my plans got derailed way back when, that dream never really went away. After everything I discovered with the account, I realized I couldn't let my parents' decisions define my future. If they won't invest in me, then I'll invest in myself. I started looking into options for going back to school part-time. I know it isn't going to be easy, especially with work and my financial responsibilities, not like I have much of an option in that area right now. I spent a whole night researching local community colleges and programs that offer online courses. There's a lot to consider, like paying for it, whether I'll be able to balance it with my jobs, and if I'll even have time to do homework. But that's life, I guess. I've also been checking out financial aid options and scholarships, although that has its own setbacks too. Regarding my parents, I haven't spoken to them since I moved out. They know I know, but I also don't want to confront them about any of this because I know they won't pay me back. I know them enough to know they will never do that. So, for now, it's better to keep secret the possibility of suing them so that, when it happens, it is a surprise. I don't think they expect me to do anything, and that is what motivates me the most to sacrifice everything to sue them. Something funny that happened recently is that I got a text from my sister. It was short and vague, something about missing me and hoping I was doing okay. I haven't replied. I don't know why she wrote to me. It must have something to do with what I found out. She practically never texts me, so it's very weird. I like to focus on the positive now, which is having a roof over my head, a plan to move forward, and my complete independence. Update 2. After talking again with the lawyer to answer some questions, I decided to send my parents a formal letter demanding they return the money. I've never enjoyed confrontations, so this was a big step outside my comfort zone. But my lawyer made it manageable. She helped me draft the letter so it was professional, direct, and left no room for confusion. It's our first step, and if they don't accept this, then we'll have to go with a formal lawsuit. We included everything, the account details, the withdrawals, and a clear demand for repayment. Once it was ready, I sent it off and braced myself for their reaction. I can say she didn't accuse me of being ungrateful. He did, which, apparently, is his favorite word lately. He launched into this whole spiel about how they did the best they could for me and how I was turning on them. He accused me of being ungrateful. He wasn't getting away with any of that. If you're thinking about it right now, my dad was trying to make me out to be the bad guy just for wanting my money back. Not a single hint of remorse. Not even a small acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just pure defensiveness and justifications. From the sound of it, he wasn't accepting anything. My first instinct was to fire back at him or defend myself, but I reminded myself that arguing with him wasn't going to be productive. I've spent years learning to keep calm in situations like this, and it paid off here. I let him talk, and when he finished, I simply said, "This isn't about gratitude or blame. It's about what's right, what's fair." But that last word for my father is not one he likes, especially if it refers to him. He started shouting again, now openly insulting me as if I were not his son. I think he would insult a stranger less than me. He was trying to intimidate me, so maybe I'd put all this behind me and everything would return to the status quo from before. Well, it was too late for that. And if anything, he was getting it worse. Eventually, he hung up on me. Later that night, I got a text from my mom. She asked if we could meet to talk. At least she seemed more open to dialogue. Even seemed sorry. This caught me off guard, because she's usually the last person to admit when anything is wrong. I thought about ignoring it, but my lawyer said I might need more evidence for a lawsuit, so I texted back that I would. And we agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next afternoon. Before you ask, my father didn't give me any evidence. Unless the insults can serve as such. When my mom arrived, she looked more stressed than I'd seen her in years. She was shaking as she held her coffee, so I knew this was hard for her. Still, I didn't feel sorry for her. If she was in this state, it was her fault, and for what she had done to me. She admitted right away that they'd used my college fund for my sister. According to her, they felt they had no other choice, because they didn't want my sister to be burdened with student loans. She went on about how difficult this decision had been for them, how they had to leave one child behind to ensure the future of the other. And then came the emotional manipulation. She said I was tearing the family apart by pursuing this, that I was being unfair to my sister, and that I needed to understand their predicament, that this wasn't a joke. I let her talk, while I recorded everything. I didn't know if it would be useful as evidence, but at least it gave me some answer. When she finally finished talking and was looking at me waiting for an answer, one that told her that I would forget about all of this, I told her that this wasn't something I could just forget. They had a responsibility to me, just like they did to my sister, and they failed me. I told her I wasn't backing down and that if they couldn't repay me, I would move forward with legal action. The rest of the conversation was tense. She tried several times to convince me to drop it, using everything. I won't bore you with her excuses, none of which were good enough or interesting to tell. In the end, she left saying she needed to talk to my dad before giving me an answer. At least that was something, because there was a possibility of getting the money back. In the days that followed, my sister started texting me. Her messages were guilt-tripping me, because of me she might lose her chance at an education. That I was being a bad brother, just because I hadn't had the opportunity to go to college and she did. And she was trying to defend my parents. Normal, when they've given you everything they're the best parents. But when they've made you work, even to buy the things you need at school, and you ask for your money back, you're the bad guy. Her messages were full of stuff like, they're your parents too. How can you do this to them? Anything I said back to her she either didn't seem to get or didn't have any intention of doing. If I didn't tell her I was going to call off this whole thing, she wasn't going to be happy. The last message I got from her was one where she said I was selfish. I'm exhausted with all of this, which is why I was hesitant about confronting my parents legally in the first place. But with each interaction with them, or my sister, it's like they're giving me more energy to do it. I'm still in contact with my lawyer because I want to know what to do if my parents continue refusing to pay me. She has already explained to me how a possible trial would be. I can tell you now that it won't be easy anyway, but knowing there's a real chance to hold them accountable is keeping me motivated. But recently, before writing this update, something happened. Out of the blue, my dad sent me an email. It was long and full of excuses I don't want to talk about here, but at the end, he mentioned they might be willing to return some of the money in payments if I dropped the legal action. Well, it's the first sign they were willing to budge. Sure, it feels like a half-assed attempt, but it's better than I expected. I forwarded it to my lawyer and asked for her opinion. Her response was clear. Partial payment was not enough. Plus, she's told me that if they're willing to negotiate just with a letter, it's because they're afraid of what might happen. She suggested drafting another letter with specific repayment terms, including a timeline and exact amounts. They wanted to send small amounts each month, but I want and need larger amounts since that might be what it takes to quit one of my part-time jobs and dedicate that time to studying. Now all that remains is to write this new letter and see what the response is. The terms are far from what they proposed, but we'll see how close they get to what I ask for. My parents didn't want to accept the terms of my last letter, so here I am with another update, but now my lawyer and I have taken a different path. My lawyer, like me, was determined to make my parents pay for every act of irresponsibility. And that's led to us uncovering even more fascinating things about my father and his level of favoritism. As part of the evidence-gathering process, my lawyer requested more detailed account statements so we could paint a full timeline of the withdrawals. When the documents arrived, I noticed something odd. There was a section showing the original source of the funds. It wasn't money my parents had saved for me, it was an inheritance from my grandparents. I never knew much about my grandparents because they both passed away when I was very young. My parents hardly ever talked about them, but they'd left this money for me to use for education. And with this new information, my anger only grew. My lawyer told me this strengthened my case, especially since the account was specifically designated for my education. My lawyer and I were going through the withdrawals from my account to see what had been spent on. One of the large withdrawals lined up almost exactly with the start of my sister's college, tuition, books, housing, everything. But there was more, and it wasn't a lot of withdrawals for what can only be described as luxury expenses. The biggest of these was a new SUV, purchased right when my sister finished high school. And it wasn't just the SUV. There were smaller, but equally unnecessary, expenses, vacations, home renovations, and even a string of spa treatments my mom had once mentioned in casual conversation. It was all there, in black and white. I was putting together banquet hall rentals, pudding, and decorations. Then there was the laptop she received on her birthday, the expensive private lessons for her hobbies, and even what appeared to be a fund for study abroad programs. I talked to my parents after analyzing all this new information, and their responses didn't disappoint me this time because I expected something like this. My dad insisted they use the money for the family and it was a good use of the money. My mom tried to justify the SUV purchase, for example, claiming my sister needed it to get to and from college safely. She even had the nerve to suggest some of the home renovations were with me in mind, even though my room wasn't renovated. But by this point, the excuses didn't matter. If they wanted to avoid legal action, they needed to start taking this seriously. That warning finally seemed to get through to them. Because after a few days of silence, they came back with a proposal, a payment plan. They couldn't return all the money right away, but they agreed to make monthly payments until the full debt was settled. But still, it didn't feel right. I could make them sign a document drafted by my lawyer, where they commit to paying me that amount, but there are two problems. First, the payments are still small, so it will take years. I've calculated it and it's 7 years. That monthly payment won't help me pay for my studies. And if I've been able to wait until now, I can wait a little longer to take them to court. Second, I think after discovering everything I don't feel like I want to give them a chance to get out of this so easily. I mean, they used my money and now they're going to pay me back the same amount as if it had been an interest-free loan. Look, I don't have a college degree, but I know that money is now worth more than $60,000. Not only because of the interest, but because of the time I've lost not studying. I should be finishing college and looking for a better paying job, but instead I've wasted many years in low-paying jobs. The opportunity to return the money has passed. Now is the time to demand what is due. That's why my parents were so nervous about this. They knew a potential lawsuit would be worth even more. But they've played their cards, and now my lawyer has played hers. She's calculated a lawsuit for $130,000. We've presented that offer again and have demanded they pay it in full. But my parents have said that number is ridiculous and they don't have the capacity to make such a large payment. Well, maybe they don't have it now, but we'll see what happens when a judge orders them to do it. I know it will take time, many have warned me about that, but I've waited this long. Waiting a few more months or years won't hurt me. Who it might hurt are my parents. Don't expect me back for a while, at least until I'm done with all this. Update 4. Surprisingly, I'm back much sooner than I expected. I thought it was going to take years to get my money back, but it's only been a few months. Might seem like a long time, but for a lawsuit of this nature it's pretty quick. We didn't go to a full trial. My parents agreed to a settlement to avoid wasting more money on lawyers. They've agreed to pay the full $130,000, and it's over. I had to wait for them to sell their house, but once they cashed the check from the sale, they wired me all the money. And it turns out my mom was right about one thing. The home renovations were also for me, because the increase in its value is what allowed them to pay my compensation. They aren't happy with me and have pretty much cut me off from the family, but who'd want to be a part of that family in the first place? Now, finally, I'll be able to study properly. Until now, I'd been attending community college, but now I can apply to transfer to a private university. My sister had to return her SUV, since that was the money my parents used to pay their lawyer when this whole thing started. But when push came to shove, they decided it was time to settle. I also had to deal with high legal costs, so I haven't kept the full $130,000, but it's much better than the initial $60,000 they offered. Initially, my parents tried to negotiate for $60,000, but with my lawyer's fees, I would have ended up with significantly less money. They complained that the legal costs were too high, to which I simply replied that they could apply for a job at McDonald's if they needed money. My sister isn't talking to me either, but that was predictable, knowing she enjoyed the money that belonged to me. And yes, she knew perfectly well where the funds my parents used on her came from. What makes it even worse is that my grandparents had also left a fund for her, but that was the first one my parents spent on their lifestyle. I guess she could sue, but for that they'll have to wait for her to make her own post here. Though I don't think she even has an account, because she hasn't read my post, or at least hasn't commented on it to me. So I don't feel bad that she's had to leave her expensive university. I don't know where she'll study now, and I don't care either. All I care about is getting back to my original plan, studying, and building my own life.